It's time for him to get the professionals in there to try to quantify this, to try to put this in the can. And he should go off and make a speech about something else somewhere. He can't, as a president, be solely identified with this. He's got to move on to other things because it's not a good look for presidents to be, totally obsessed with something, and then your success or failure is riding on that.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee and welcome to the Trump Report on Times Radio. A reminder, you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for European and NATO policy, and with over 30 years of experience at the Pentagon. Jim, how are you doing?
Well, yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm here at The Hague for the summit, and the summit should be beginning, I think, in about an hour or so. The summiteers will arrive. But part of summits these days is not just the summit itself, but it's the so-called side events, and they're called NATO forums. And so they are here to have a time for speakers to come together, both from the governments as well as think tanks, the media, to talk about the issues. And so I'm here for that.
Well, it couldn't be a better day for you to be at a conference like this, because we are speaking after the ceasefire brokered with between Trump and Qatar, between Israel and Iran, broke this morning, only a few hours after it was brokered. Now Donald Trump has spoken saying that he's not happy with Iran, but that he's really unhappy with Israel. He then said of both, they've been fighting for so long and so hard, they don't know what the F they're doing. Is this one of the angriest we've seen the president in recent times?
Well, I think that the talk around town here is that no one really believes that this is, in fact, has happened in terms of an agreement that's going to be, held. That it was the preemptive tweet that went out last night. That neither side has really officially agreed to anything. This isn't the normal diplomacy that one sees at a time like this. This seems to be diplomacy by tweet in a lot of ways. So around here, people are waiting to really see what Israel and Iran are going to do. You hear contradictory things from both camps about what's happened. There's still missiles have been flying, and so there is just a lot of waiting to see, and it impacts the credibility of the president of the United States if he comes out and says something that turns out not to be completely factual. So everyone is just sitting and waiting.
So is what you're hearing at the conference that this wasn't an official ceasefire that was agreed?
I think that most of the conference goers, and again, these are not the summiteers from the governments. These are all the people on the outside, those that pontificate. And so we're not used to seeing a ceasefire happen or a peace agreement happen or the guns to fall silent without negotiations and signatures on paper. Just doing it by tweet, it doesn't have the credibility that the time calls for. So for most of us out here who have been around the block a couple of times, we just don't know what to believe, and we need to hear something, from the other parties, something factual to make us understand certainly what the details are of this.
Okay, so we've seen Donald Trump today. He spoke to reporters outside the White House, like the comments I mentioned earlier. He also went on Truth Social and sort of attacked Israel, saying, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. This isn't the first time we've seen him be critical of Israel. Does it surprise you at all that he seems to be being firmer with them as a close ally than he is with Iran this morning?
Well, I think he is going to be firm with people who are getting in his way. He right now has got a lot of skin in this game. He has decided to do the tweet, to go out on a limb about that his ability to bring about a peace agreement and a ceasefire. And so if one of the parties is going to get in his way, if one of the parties is going to not do what he said they were going to do, he doesn't. He's upset by that. So even if it's Israel, he's going to say, "Hey, you're raining on my parade here. Let's head towards peace. That's what you said last night." And so he's really got himself out in front of his skis, as we say, and we'll have to see how this sorts itself out in the coming days.
So if you're Donald Trump or the US, obviously I mentioned you've got so much experience in the Pentagon. What's your next move from here?
I think what I would do is get my diplomats involved very quickly. Marco Rubio, his State Department ambassadors who have done this, Steve Witkoff, if that's who he wants to get involved. But I think I would get off tweet. I would get these people in a room with Iran and with Israel and trying to put this into place. Uh, if you sit back and you don't begin to try to put something on paper, um, that gives time for the parties to go off the rails. So all of a sudden, for the fighting to begin. I don't know. Maybe he's got his people on airplanes flying over to Geneva or Istanbul or wherever they're going to meet. But the more that you don't see something happening other than tweets, the more of a chance you've got that things are going to go off the rails. This is very tenuous. And he cannot think that he can just do this by himself. He's got to have his professionals jump in and begin to put something on paper all the parties understand in terms of what's expected of them. There's been a lot of verbal things, and some tweets here and there, some statements from capitals, but this got to be put down on a piece of paper. Expectations of all the parties, timelines. It doesn't have to be a long negotiation, but it's got to be at least a framework that's agreed.
He said earlier today, I've got to get Israel to calm down. Last night, after he brokered the ceasefire, he said, please do not violate it to Iran. We know that so far, he's pledged peace in Ukraine, he's pledged peace in Gaza. He almost had a shot at a sort of peace between Israel and Iran last night. His mood now, he seems, exasperated and almost desperate.
Well, he does, and I think he would be less exasperated if he could get his experienced diplomats involved, or at least Marco Rubio involved. It's hard to tell how much he's really doing himself, phone calls that he's making, or intermediaries perhaps that are acting on his behalf. It's hard to tell what the formal levers are being pulled to make this happen. And I think if he feels he's got to personally do this, it's not going to work. And so he will just end up being exasperated and looking bad. He needs to put his professionals involved in this and go on to something else. I mean, that's what I would recommend.
You mean like move on to something else entirely?
Yeah, that's one thing that we've determined over time. Presidents who become obsessed with something. I think Jimmy Carter started this, frankly, getting obsessed about something and working on something, every day. It becomes too much attached to you. Success or failure is too much attached to you. This is your project. You're working on it and nothing else. And pretty soon you're the public face for this. He's been doing that, but I think it's time for him, as I mentioned, it's time for him to get the professionals in there to try to quantify this, to try to put this in the can, and he should go off and make a speech about something else somewhere. He can't, as a president, be solely identified with this. He's got to move on to other things because it's not a good look for presidents to be, totally obsessed with something, and then your success or failure is riding on that.
It's interesting you say that because the initial strikes by the US were, of course, opposed by a proportion of Trump's MAGA base. Some of the most prominent figures even publicly came out and spoke against it. If they don't turn onto something else and this doesn't become a sort of one and done operation, does it risk splitting Donald Trump's base?
I don't think the Trump's base knows where they are now. I think they have had their positions pretty well staked out before, but then you have something like this that kind of falls into the middle. It's neither isolationism nor is it nation building and going off and becoming a globalist suddenly. But Trump has found himself like a pinball, uh, you know, arm's length for Netanyahu. And then all of a sudden, Netanyahu is his closest partner in this, uh, on the, going for peace and only peace. And then he's doing these strikes, and he's even hinting at regime change, and so he's all over the map. And I think he has been dragging his MAGA base back and forth as well, because they try to be loyal to him. They might fight each other, but they try to be loyal to him. And so now every time they stake a claim on something, Trump will change, and suddenly they find themselves on the outs, and they have to pull their flag off of where they because Trump has changed. So I think right now the MAGA base is is they've lowered their voice a bit because they don't want to be caught out going in one direction and then finding that the president has made a turn. So, and I don't think right now he's as concerned about the MAGA base. I think he's concerned about having a winner on his hands. And he's not going to let the MAGA base make him go in a direction he doesn't want to go in.
But if he can't get that winner, and it's a big if, then what happens for him next?
It's a gamble. And that's the thing about being obsessed with this. If he's obsessed with this gamble, and if it doesn't work, then he's splattered with the taint of that not working. So what's important for him is to turn this over to the State Department, have them put it in the bag, and so he can move on to something else. If it doesn't work, he's put some distance between himself and this. But if he is doing the day-to-day work here, every tweet, um, then he's too closely associated with it. Uh, he's too closely associated with the hard work that comes with post operations. He can be involved in the operation and make the speech that he did, etc. But now he's got to turn it over to the State Department to put it in the bag, and he can go off and do something to make the MAGA base happy. I don't know what that would be, but he's rolled the dice on this, and now he's got to give it some separation so that if the gamble's a failure, he escapes some of the fallout, some of the shrapnel.
You mentioned that those regime change comments. He seems quite passionate about peace and a ceasefire today, but sort of 24, 48 hours ago, he was talking about possible regime change in Iran. Is it possible to have both?
He has a penchant for putting into a tweet fleeting thoughts that goes through his mind. A lot of times those are intemperate. A lot of times they're almost like it's a joke. It's almost like he's making a cynical remark. But when the president says something, it has meaning, whether it's a joke or not. And so I think in this case, it seemed that he was just ruminating, because I think he's been told by a lot of people that regime change, particularly in Iran, could really go bad in a big way. And that's a bigger gamble than he's going to want to take. He wanted to get rid of the Iranian nuclear capability, and he's made a good stab at doing that. He hasn't been talking about regime change, so he's got a win there. He's got a win. He took care of the nuclear capability. If he's going to add to the docket regime change and hope that turns out well for him, um, that's too big a gamble, and a gamble he doesn't need to make because it's not important to what he laid out as the reasons for his strikes. So I think number one, to answer your question, no, a regime change doesn't necessarily bring peace. It brings chaos. Maybe something happens down the road that's peaceful, but it's an ugly road getting there. And so for Trump, he's gambled enough. I think this is a gamble too far.
You mentioned that he had a win there. So I just wanted to ask, after the sort of apparent breaking of the ceasefire today, Are we back to square one, or have we made some progress, and has Trump made some progress?
I would say he has made progress in the sense that whether he has destroyed their capability, and we still don't really know, or set it back a number of years, uh, that's a win for a lot of people. That's a win because it seemed that he was close to, it seemed Iran was close to potentially to a nuclear capability. That was still nascent, but they were closer to it than people realized. I guess you could put it that way. And he acted against everyone's advice. He acted with Israel, and he was able to pull off, a feat. That's a win. He set out to say no nuclear bombs for Iran, and he did it. And also, the raid itself was pretty sophisticated, so he was able to show off U.S. military prowess. I haven't really heard anyone around here raising a fuss about the Iranians not having a nuclear capability. I think a lot of Europeans, at least that I'm talking to here, seem quite okay with that. So so this can be absolutely defined as a win for him and for the West generally, quite frankly. But if he raises the stakes by going for regime change and it turns into a disaster, that will taint everything that he's done to date on this.
Just finally, you mentioned it there. You are obviously at the NATO summit in The Hague at the moment, where Donald Trump is expected to arrive tonight just for a flyby 24-hour visit. What's the general mood there about his arrival?
Excitement. It's excitement not because yay we love to see Donald Trump, but it's like the big guy's coming to town. And in fact, a taxi driver today was describing to me seeing the Beast, the car that he usually drives in had been delivered earlier, and they saw it driving around town. This is kind of exciting. It's the circus coming to town. It's the circus coming to town, and they are. They think it's gonna be a big event. This is the people on the street, and this is exciting. And so here he comes, and for all of us who are we're not necessarily the people on the street. We're the blob. We're think tank people. We're interested too to see what happens because it's always drama when he arrives to NATO. So that's what it is. It's a great expectation. If he did not show up and he said Marco Rubio, it'd be a lot of disappointment around here.
Well, we'll be watching it closely here at Times Radio, and I'm sure we'll be covering it on the Trump Report. But for now, Jim Townsend, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.